Welcome to the Cloud Pod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, Google, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
and Peter.
Episode 64, recorded on March 18th, 2020. The Cloud Pod on lockdown. Good evening, Jonathan, and welcome back, Peter.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, other than I'm stuck in my house with my kids.
Yeah.
And I can't leave, so that's not so good. But other than that, it's going pretty well. Work's been very productive with all this extra time not commuting.
Right.
I actually had to drive down to a place right by the office yesterday for a doctor's appointment. I made the appointment right by the office because, it's convenient. It's 5 minutes away, except now it turned out to be a 2-hour drive there and back. So,
Was it crowded on the roads?
It was not. In fact, I took a picture down in Pleasanton of the intersection of Stone Ridge and what's the other road? I forget the other road now. No cars there at all. It's like 5:30 in the afternoon. Normally, it's absolutely jam-packed full of people.
Yeah.
Zero cars apart from me. It's very, very creepy. But I've never had a commute back from the office at that time of day that only took me 40 minutes. That's a good half hour short than usual.
Wow.
Easily a half an hour shorter than usual.
Oh, yeah.
So, well, I mean, I guess that kind of leads us right into the most important story is that everyone's kind of on lockdown here with coronavirus and COVID-19 or whatever name you want to use this exact moment for it. SARS version 2, I heard out there as well. But it's been kind of an interesting time. I'm sure you guys are all coping with working from home in your own ways. We're here actually in lockdown in the Bay Area where we're actually not allowed to. We're supposed to be socially distancing by not leaving our house. So
Yeah, I heard they're predicting a dramatic increase this year in pregnancies and divorces.
yeah, well, actually, that's I saw an article out of China that was saying basically, as the lockdowns left, there's a very large line at the divorce office. And then, I suspect someone mentioned on Twitter, I think they called them coronials, which I think is a fantastic name.
Pretty good.
But yeah, so I mean, I've gotten really good at changing my Zoom backgrounds and calls to keep it fresh, and so I think today I was in Cabo San Lucas on my Zoom calls.
Oh, nice.
Been slacking a lot, in the chat type, not the real slacking, and just doing the normal things that you do, but just from my home office. How about you guys? How are you coping with all of this?
The Zoom background's pretty fun. I had the MASH field hospital background earlier today.
Nice.
Which was touchy subject, but it's pretty funny. It's pretty tough. I mean, I think I have a head start on working from home. I've worked from home for a lot of years, and so I know how to do it without doing the laundry or doing anything else or seeing stuff around the house and get distracted. And I think it does take some practice, and people who haven't had the opportunity to do it before are definitely going to have a hard time getting into it. But I feel like I'm more productive working from home than in the office anyway, so it's all good, really.
Yeah, about 80% of our business is remote. So I've worked remote a significant amount of time, and I actually don't know when I would get my laundry done if I couldn't work remote. But yeah, it's been pretty easy, but it's been funny how, seeing the services, like not just online collaboration services, but just like cell phone service has been spotty. Today I got occasionally calls don't go through and it says, weren't able to connect your call today. We weren't able to connect your call in Spanish, which was really interesting.
Wow. I'm surprised the internet hasn't fallen over just yet, but I think it may well do as more and more people end up being isolated. But it's interesting that so many people are still actually at work. Like, the laundry services are still going out to work, and the yard services are coming around cutting people's yards and stuff.
Yeah, it's a little interesting what is considered essential services versus what isn't. I'm not sure yard service is essential, but apparently so. But it's been interesting to even see some of the services like Google and Slack. They've actually struggled with some of this load. This is the highest peaks they've probably ever had on their systems, and they're leveraging cloud like Azure and Google and AWS to really handle this workload. But all of them have suffered a little bit. With Zoom's, their stock's been all over the place. They've declared that they're having record loads and they're having trouble scaling to it. Slack struggled with a crushing load. Microsoft Teams has had a couple of outages out there. Just overall a rough time in general. So Hug Ops for those S3 people out there trying to keep the systems running and really driving the ability for us to all work from home in an effective way is super important.
Something I find strange about this whole thing is, if you're an organization that uses Slack or Teams or Zoom or anything else, I get video conferencing maybe a bit more prevalent now with people working from home, but instant messaging, I would have thought, would be the same regardless of where you are. I mean, are people really communicating more because they're at home versus in the next cubicle?
Well, I think people are using Slack for 100% of their communications now, and instead of, not using it for the guy to talk to the guy next to him in his cubicle.
I'll do everything I can do to avoid actually speaking to somebody face to face. So for me, I'm using it probably the same or less than before.
Yes, I would say that you weren't in the extreme minority, but you might not be in the majority.
Probably not. No, I do think it's funny though. I send somebody a message on Slack and ask them a question, and instead of just replying on Slack, I don't know. They literally get up from the desk, walk over to me, and say, I don't know, and then walk back to the desk. I'm like, oh, just.
I tell all the time. I could tell the conversation is going somewhere where we're going to be talking past each other forever, and someone asks me a question in a public channel. My response is, "Call me."
Yeah,
not doing this. Call me.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
That's a good tip to just, when things aren't communicating well on email or via Slack, just get on a phone call. But at the end of the show, we'll share some of our work from home tips as some people are very new to that process as kind of our looking ahead segment. The other thing that is kind of interesting out there, the Amazon actually released a open source post basically saying, first of all, there's Chime, and if you want to use Chime, go ahead. But then they also gave you a quick start guide on how to set up a service called Jitsi, which is an open source web conferencing solution, which is kind of interesting. So do check that out if you're looking for the ability to host your own online video conferencing system to help you through this troubling time. You can apparently do that with open source, which I didn't even know existed.
I didn't either. Yeah, that's cool. I used Asterisk and FreePBX for years and years and years.
Yep.
And it worked great I had an instance running like from 2008 until 2014. I think we shut it down in 14 or 15. And I don't think it went down once. It was awesome.
I remember Asterisk and buying the FXO card for the computer, so you could plug a real phone into it and do stuff with it. It's really good fun.
Well, other than the web services guys having a tough time, one of the things about Slack, they actually had their earnings call, and they actually mentioned that they're concerned about profitability for next quarter. And I was thinking about why that might be. And then I realized it's all these companies who are now on the free tier for Slack who spun it up in the last 2 weeks. And suddenly that free tier doesn't look so good to Slack's accountants, I'm pretty sure.
Right, they're wishing they'd charge per message instead of per user.
Yeah, very, very true.
Yeah, really.
Well, of course, this coronavirus stuff has led us into a couple more conferences being canceled. So Microsoft has canceled its Build developer conference amid the coronavirus outbreak. WWDC has gone digital, which will be in June. Build was supposed to be in May. And then apparently Google Cloud Next Digital is also being canceled. So they went digital 2 weeks ago, and now they've decided to postpone it, deciding that they concerns with the health and safety of their customers, partners, and employees. Right now, the most important thing is focusing their attention on supporting customers. And they'll share a date a little bit later for the new Digital Connect, which I think is just within their way of saying we realize we don't want to do an online conference because no one will attend it. So we'll just we'll wait till this is all over, and we'll schedule a new conference maybe right on top of Amazon reInvent just to really annoy them.
I assume it would be hard for them to organize a conference and actually create the content without them being in the same offices together. So
yeah, we had booths planned for Google Next and for the AWS SF Summit, so both of those are off.
Yeah, I have a lot of stickers that I was going to hand out at your booth, and they're now in a box in my office, looking a little sad.
We're still holding out hope for Chicago. So if that doesn't get canceled, you're welcome to join us there.
I don't know if I'll be able to join you in Chicago, but I will definitely send stickers.
So I will pass them out.
Well, we'll keep our eye on. I'm a little bit nervous about Reinforce right now, which is supposed to be in June. They haven't said one way or the other, but this is keep seeing it slips out farther and farther every time they announce something new. I heard even the president saying August yesterday, so I was that made me a little bit nervous because that's I think a little closer to my vacation.
A cruise, right?
Yeah, but that's end of November. So
a cruise.
Yeah.
Yes.
Brave man. COVID Cruise Lines just rolls off the tongue.
Well, you have to definitely be very diligent about your health and cleaning your hands while you're on a cruise boat. All right, well, let's get on to the news this week. Amazon Web Services has launched several new features here for Redshift. The first one being the ability to pause and resume your Redshift cluster. This allows you to suspend the on-demand billing while the customer is not being used and only pay for the storage. For example, a cluster used only for development or for production workloads for like ELT can now have compute billing suspended during the day when it's not processing data, and then spin back up at night when it takes on ingesting all of that data for your BI tools.
And I bet by the time reInvent comes around, Redshift will be serverless.
Yeah, it kind of leads right into the next story, which is that they've introduced support for materialized views for Redshift, which allows you to basically kind of create a pre-computed set of tables for things like dashboards or BI tools or ELT data processing. And these material views pre-compute the results of the query and efficiently maintain them, sort of like a stored procedure or a SQL view, if you will. And I was thinking about these two features put together with a caching tier would be really quite interesting, because now I can process all my Redshift data, put it into these materialized views as a cache, and then I just basically turn off the rest of the cluster, because I only need to basically serve this data for a period of time until I need to update it again.
Yeah, I find it kind of strange. I always kind of shied away from stored procedures because I don't want engineering deploying massive compute jobs on my database clusters, because I have no way of managing what they're going to do on a day-to-day basis. So I always wanted them to pull the data out and kind of manage that stuff externally. And so I'm not quite sure how I feel about moving the compute into the Redshift service exactly. But I mean, it makes sense. It's definitely on a path to being completely serverless.
Yeah, but I mean, that being able to pause those clusters is huge. When you see the real cost of like running Redshift versus like BigQuery, some of the workloads, the cost was so prohibitive for worse performance. But oftentimes it comes down to the reason for that is you're looking at it and you're running these dev clusters all the time, and they're doing so little work on them. And yeah, I think this is really going to help bring them closer to parity from a bang for the buck standpoint.
So we're going to make a prediction. Is it Aurora Redshift, or is it going to be serverless Redshift? How are they going to market this in 6 months' time?
Well, you should wait till the reInvent prediction show, then
you
make a determination then.
But thanks for giving me some good ideas.
Oh, no, I'm claiming that right now. It's game on this time.
You're reaching out to all your contacts at Amazon, like, okay, just give me something. I'll share the bragging rights with you.
Yep.
It's all good. Well, anyway, with these things going digital, we have to make a decision if we're going to do prediction shows for digital conferences, which we've never done before. So that'll be a fun little exercise we have to figure out sometime in the future. So
wow, how do we even do that though? I mean, like we literally have to sit there and watch 2,000 hours worth of presentations to figure out if.
No, just the keynotes.
I assume they're still going to do a keynote, and then we'll just tie it to the keynotes. I mean, it depends on how these things are structured. So we'll make a decision on the fly as we see what the agendas look like and the itineraries for these digital conferences. So, API Gateway is offering a new private integration with Amazon ELB and AWS Cloud Map as part of an HTTP API general availability release. This allows you to basically use API Gateway to do HTTP API calls, enabling you to easily build high-performance RESTful APIs that offer up to 71% cost savings and 60% latency reduction compared to just using API Gateway. Of course, you'll never be able to Google this feature because it joins the friends like Chef Cookbooks and Vault and things that you can't actually Google. And so that'll be fun to find the documentation for. But if you do find it, you'll find that you can take advantage of several new features, including the ability to route requests via private Amazon ELBs, including support for AWS ALB and IP-based services registered in AWS Cloud Map. So there you go.
But I still wish they had a Lambda endpoint though, because Lambda is the service that I actually send bulk amounts of data to. And I want an endpoint for that, because traversing the internet and paying for the egress for all the data sent to Lambda is expensive. And if I could pay the 1 or 2 cents an hour for the endpoint in the VPC versus paying for the egress, then that'd be much preferable. So I'm seriously hoping that's on the roadmap too.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the first step in that direction, right? You get out of the complexity of running API Gateway for a simple Lambda function to now you can do an HTTP call to that Lambda function.
And I do like this, the more simplified API Gateway now. It's a lot cheaper and certainly a lot faster.
Yeah, if you're doing HTTP APIs, it's the right way to go. Amazon Elasticache for Redis is announcing the new Global Data Store. Global Data Store for Redis enables fast and reliable and secure cross-region replication as a fully managed service. You can write to your Elasticache Redis cluster in one region and have the data available for the read in 2 other cross-region replica clusters, enabling low latency reads and DR across regions. In the event of a primary failure, you can promote one of those read clusters to read-write, and in about a minute. So there you go.
So it's like a spanner.
Either way, you run into the same issues that everyone runs into as far as synchronous writes across large distances, but it's super cool that they're just making it easy. Hey, we understand the limitations, but we don't want to manage that infrastructure across multiple regions.
No, I mean, it's fair. I mean, if they publish an SLA of 2 seconds for an update between regions, then that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, it is what it is.
As long as you understand the limits of the service, then great. Use it how you like.
Exactly. I love it.
Hey everyone, Jonathan here. I just wanted to take a minute to thank the cloud consulting gurus at Foghorn for helping make the CloudPod possible. These folks truly get it. Cloud consulting experts since 2008, they are premier tier partners with AWS, Google Cloud Platform Silver, and Microsoft Azure partners. From multi-cloud to containers to moving full production workloads to the cloud under the tightest compliance, Foghorn's team of full-stack cloud engineers have been there, done that, gotten the t-shirt, and are ready to share their experience with you. If you're in the market for some talent to supplement your team, visit www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. Foghorn, the promise of cloud delivered.
AWS App Config announces integration with Amazon S3. App Config now supports S3 as a source to store and retrieve your app configurations, which raised a question to me, how did you do this before? And that was apparently via either storing your application config as SSM parameters or via an SSM document. Storing your configuration, though, in S3 enables customers to store larger size configurations in any format and simplifies the whole path, just specifying a simple URI path to the data in S3.
I feel like we kind of come full circle on this because before Parameter Store existed, I used to use S3 for exactly this purpose. In fact, I still do, because it's a whole lot easier.
I think that's kind of what they've realized is no one wants the complexity of SSM to do this, but I don't know why I would want the complexity of app config, because again, I agree with you. I can just run cloud init. I can pull what I want out of S3, and I can just run my configuration utility. Maybe there's some versioning capabilities in app config that are interesting, but I'd have to look into a little bit further.
I really want to disagree with you guys, and I can't.
Oh, go on, disagree.
No, I can't. I totally agree. It's like, I guess the things I do are just more simple because it just makes so much sense.
Is there some transparency in this, though? Is it you're not literally going to S3 and pulling the document. It's just storing the document in the back end, and you can still kind of pull out named parameters from a document that's in S3. I assume they've kind of simplified it somehow.
I assume that they allow you to basically set up multiple documents into S3 and then kind of version them. Then you can kind of rotate between the versions of the config that you need. So instead of you doing that manually in config files or in scripting, you can basically do that with config. And so you can basically call the same function inside your automation, but in reality, it maps to a different version of that config file based on the environment you're in or the version you want.
No, I read the press release for this app config thing with the integration with Amazon S3, and it gives like zero detail on how it actually works. I mean, in fact, it just makes me think that you're just literally storing a JSON document in S3, because it even says you don't need to create a schema prior to creating the application configuration, just like if you dropped anything you wanted into an S3 bucket to begin with. So I don't know.
Well, and the other one is when it mentions storing larger size configurations. So obviously you could just drop big honking config files in S3, and it's probably something that Amazon didn't want to support in SSM. Or
a config file gets stored as an S3. You don't want to put that into SSM documents.
We store our binary code for our application in our config file.
Oh, that's awesome.
Can you please increase the size of SSM parameters to 460 megabytes?
Well, you do remember you can pay for those now as premium parameters, if you recall.
If I was AWS and I designed the parameter store service, I would have completely built it around S3 to begin with. It just would be a facade in front of an S3 bucket per customer or per account, and there would have been no limitation on the size because...
But the secret is it isn't built on top of S3. Everything's built on top of S3.
So why the size limit, though? I just don't get it.
I thought it would have been built on top of Dynamo for some reason. I don't know why.
I don't know about Dynamo for that. It's a weird use case.
I mean, it doesn't need to be fast. Yeah. It's going to be a deploy time. So, who cares if it's 1 second instead of 10 milliseconds?
I don't know. Well, let's move on from Google from AWS to Google. So this is a kind of a fun story. So Google typically does these blog posts where they talk about different things. They have guest bloggers come on. We don't typically talk about those, but this one caught my eye because it was about finding a problem at the bottom of the Google stack. This is an SRE blog for DevOps and tooling. So basically, they started talking about at Google scale, 1,000,000 to 1 chances happen all the time, which is an interesting perspective that you kind of have to put into your mind as you think about Google's infrastructure and the size of it globally. And so this incident basically talks about an error that they were seeing that was within their error budget limits, and the traffic on their load balancer team was alerted that Google front ends used to cache frequency access contents were producing an abnormally high number of errors. Apparently, their SRE team basically drains traffic from there to investigate further, which is their standard SOP, which is what you do at Google scale. And based on prior experience, they know that this is often caused by transient network issues, and so they started looking for some type of error, and they identified BGP flapping. But when they engaged the network team, the flapping actually seem to be coming from the machine side, not from the router in the rack itself or in the data center. So further investigation on the system identified that systems reported a CPU clock throttling due to package temperature above threshold, and they narrowed this down to a single rack with their tooling, and they noticed that machines next to the rack were not affected, but this rack was definitely impacted. So they opened a ticket with their DC team, and they determined that a physical issue was causing the chain of events. And so the problem that they apparently found was that on inspection of the rack, the casters on the rear wheels had failed, and the machines were overheating as a consequence of being tilted in the rack. And so it was an interesting story. That's really great graphs and really detailed troubleshooting they used. And they were actually able to identify that this was caused by the racks being overloaded. And so their DC team was actually to proactively identify other racks that were at this weight limit and potentially address it proactively to avoid similar issues in the future. And overall, this is a pretty nice SRE success story for Google.
What a great story.
It's one of those stories that like the one where I had the arc failure in the switchgear at a data center, and we lost all of the generator switchgear capability and the city power. It's one of those stories. It's one in a million, but Google has those much more often than I did in my career.
What I will say is you would think that there would be monitoring of things like the hardware at that level to begin with, and that the overheating in itself would have been picked up as an error by infrastructure team.
You think about their scale again, you don't typically, hard drives fail all the time. They just route around those problems. And so I'm sure that if a server dies because of a heat problem, they just mark it dead and move the load off of it. And then at some point, some person comes through and replaces it when they go through the rotation of those cabinets. It's just a different scale altogether.
That's a good point, actually. I guess, the fans fail all the time. There could be lots of reasons why an overheating event would have happened. You would probably think that the wheels would be the last thing you'd ever think of.
When you think about resiliency at that scale, right, you're talking about, you probably have 10,000, 20,000 nodes handling this one function. And if you have 6 servers that are overheating, in the overall capacity of the pool, it's very minor. So
Google run their servers until the wheels fall off.
Very nice. There's a show title for you.
Absolutely.
Go back and change it. That is pretty good. Too bad that wasn't, dude. If that was lightning round, you would have been a winner right there.
Nice.
It's too bad. Foghorn recently had one of our longtime colleagues who we worked with for years, and then for a long time he spent at Facebook and more recently Google as an SRE manager. And without giving away any trade secrets, he's shared just some generalities around the fact that Google has gotten rid of all the low-hanging fruit. So you mentioned that like these things come up and it doesn't even cross their failure threshold. When something does cross their threshold, it's usually something that is pretty esoteric. Like never would have thought to get that in the plan. And it's always interesting to troubleshoot. That's one of the huge benefits of being those hyperscalers is they've literally seen it all.
That's the advantage you're getting is you're getting their experience, which is why, looking at things like Oracle or even GCP at some level, they're still pretty new to this game. Now, Google, you have the advantage that they ran massive search infrastructure for a very long time. So it's not as much of a problem for them. But, people like Oracle, that's something they're still learning those mistakes.
Yeah, they're a software company. They don't know how to run that stuff.
Well, they did buy Sun, so I can't call them completely a software company anymore.
I guess I can. I'd be wrong, but I can.
It'd be cool if there was a site like srestories.com or something where these kind of tales get told, because I think they're really interesting.
I think they're really fascinating tales, and so there are a couple of podcasts out there. There's a Splunk podcast where they talk about stories from the pager, kind of thing. So definitely there are some out there. Check them out if you're interested.
Have you guys read the Google SRE book?
Yeah, it's quite good.
I would recommend that to all our listeners, by the way. If you're stuck at home now like we are and you need something to read, go download the Google SRE book. It's great.
There's a second one now, too, that it's kind of like an SRE workbook. It gives you a little bit more practical advice versus the theoretical high level. And it's also similar from Google. That's a nice additional. So if you've read the first book, but you haven't read the second one, that's also a great thing to check out, too.
I wonder how many businesses, software or SaaS companies can actually implement SRE the way Google envisioned it in their book, though. Because infrastructure has typically been a separate entity completely than engineering. And, even though we've had the whole DevOps phase and the Phoenix book and everything else, I still think engineering still throw the software over the wall and infrastructure people still have to run it. And I don't know how prevalent it is in the industry that the people in the SRE teams actually have the authority or the expertise to go and re-engineer.
Well, I mean, for all the companies out there that took their L1, L2 teams or their NOC teams and just rebranded them to SRE, they can't.
Yeah.
Right.
But teams, there are companies that are out there that have done a really great job, really kind of taking this. Google, of course, being the poster child, LinkedIn being kind of the second one. They have a slightly different bend on SRE, but very similar in many ways. Amazon, I think, has a pretty robust SRE culture. I don't know about Microsoft. That's one I would be curious about. If someone out there wants to ping us about it. But I think there are companies that are very successful, but they happen to be in the FANG class of companies. Facebook's, Netflix's, Google's, and not the smaller companies yet. But I think we'll start seeing implementations that allow it to kind of move down into smaller companies a little bit more prescriptively. That's really why this workbook is actually really interesting to me, because it gives you that more hands-on, practical implementation details that I think helps really answer some of those questions that company who's trying to make this pivot and really likes the idea of it but doesn't know how to get there. I think it does help them quite a bit.
Yeah, I really like Google's model because it really allows for two separate organizations, SRE and development, but allows you to put in place incentives for those two teams to work very closely together and share burden together and share successes together. And that rather than just saying, okay, we're gonna make them one team because otherwise we can't align their interests.
But although they're two teams, they still rotate engineers through both teams. If you're an engineer on a product development team, you will still spend some time with SRE, after a major release or something, because you're the expert in the field. You can train people. Yeah. You're right there on the ground at release time, and you can troubleshoot, and you know the system, and you kind of hand off that knowledge. I think that's what I'd like to see more of, especially in the company I'm at right now, is actually having engineering kind of suffer some of the pain a little bit, but also bring them in to share their expertise, because they're so detached from production, and the people in SRE or the NOC are so detached from engineering that they have a very hard time communicating effectively about what the problem is and how to fix it.
Absolutely. I think that, I love that model.
Yeah, I definitely, it's an area that I'm very interested in from my day job, and how do we convert to being more SRE-like. But even I look at some of the stuff in the Google book and I'm like, having a full sustaining engineering team is going to be difficult initially. But if you actually start taking kind of some of the models they have, right, where you have mature applications, you have innovation applications, and you have kind of bread and butter revenue generating products, but are the main products, and you have those kind of three dimensions of products, and you can actually see products transitioning through those three different models, then SRE can make a lot of sense from even the sustaining engineering perspective, where those more mature products that aren't getting a lot of innovation, or maybe on the tail end of their cycle, can get someone to actually care and feed for them and make sure they're secure and they're doing what they need to do, because they might generate a lot of revenue still. And if you think about Google, they have thousands of products.
Yeah.
Whereas most companies only have maybe 3 or 4 really major products that they're really trying to service. You can company like Slack, for example, right? Like their product is chat, and maybe they have a couple hundred microservices as a power, but at the end of the day, it's one application. And so at any given time, the entire application is some level of innovation.
Yeah, I mean, scale. I think the scale of the Googles and the Facebooks and LinkedIn's definitely make SRE easier or more cost effective to implement than it would be for a smaller company.
Agreed.
Unless you're really, really, really small and you just have one guy who does everything.
Well, Google says that love at first terabyte comes from SSDs plus VMs. And they are now allowing you to attach 6 terabyte and 9 terabyte local SSDs to your compute engine virtual machines. The throughput and IOPS of these new offerings will be up to 3.5 times their current 3 terabyte offerings, and results in fewer instances needed to meet your performance goals, which frequently lead to reduced costs. Both the 6 terabyte and the 9 terabyte instances will retain the current per gigabit pricing of the 3 terabytes. So this is definitely a nice improvement if you're looking for more local disk storage for your compute engine.
That's pretty big for local storage. I think even the Amazon's local NVMe storage isn't that big.
It's a pretty big fault area for your system if you have all your data on that local disk. So do take some caution. But if you have this use case, then make use of it as appropriate, but take the precautions as needed. Well, Azure has the virtual network NAT is now generally available. from Azure. The virtual NAT can be configured for one or more subnets of a virtual network and provide on-demand connectivity to your machines. This is a fully managed and highly resilient service with one or more static public IP addresses available, configurable idle timeouts, TCP reset for unrecognizable connections, multidimensional alerts using Azure Monitor, and optional zone isolation per AZ. And this is available in all public regions. Now, I read that to you while I was thinking to myself, how do they not have this before?
Brought to you from the Department of 1993 related news stories. I'm like,
come on, it hasn't been, NAT gateway hasn't been there that long.
NAT's been around forever.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you could have done NAT. You could do NAT.
You had a one-to-one mapping between instances and public IPs previously.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I mean, that's a good way to use up a lot of IPv4 addresses.
I do like the multi-dimensional alerts, though. That sounds very futuristic.
Yeah. How many dimensions do you need to know for egress net traffic? I mean, it seems like it either works or it doesn't.
Just enough to charge you for the service, I guess.
The Forrester Wave has a new Functions as a Service platform wave, and Microsoft has been named a leader in this new wave, number 2 position behind Amazon, which is slightly awkward since Microsoft paid for this to be this blog post. Amazon is ahead of them with both a strong current offering and stronger strategy than Microsoft. Google is a strong performer and not considered a leader yet, but interesting enough, Tencent was above them in this particular wave. Cloudflare was interesting as well because it had a stronger strategy than Google, but doesn't have the capabilities delivered yet. So apparently, if Cloudflare can deliver its capabilities in the functions as a service space, they may surpass Google. I don't know how that works, but it's very interesting. And then poor Oracle was all the way back in its lonesome in the Challengers box. So poor Oracle.
Where was 50 Cent?
I think he's quarantined making raps somewhere.
Probably.
Making raps. You got to just take that quote out of context and use it as in some other show somewhere else. Making raps.
I really dislike these companies, though, that will come in and investigate something for you for a price and then tell you that you're the leader. It's so dishonest.
Pay for play. It's a good business model for some companies.
Function as a service. I don't know.
Listen to the Ben Kehoe episode to learn all about functions as a service.
I mean, I think the winning tactic for sure is just come up with a new buzzword and then call in Forrester or somebody else. And of course, you got to be the leader because nobody else has a clue what you're talking about.
That's how FinOps became a thing too, technically. There was some chatter about the FinOps and being vendor specific a little bit earlier in the week. So we were giving Rob a bad time about it in our Slack channel, and he had a pretty good argument back about it, which I thought was fine. So, but Azure has also released the new feature for the Form Recognizer, which means they just lost the name for Textract because Form Recognizer is sort of better descriptive, but also worse all at the same time than Textract is. But they have several new features for the Form Recognizer, and those include the ability for customization of the service. Now supports training with and without labels, which makes it easier for customers to reliably extract valuable information from their forms. The new Layout API, which is capable of extracting text and tables from documents with highly accurate OCR results, and pre-built receipts to improve accuracy and reduce error rates for key fields, which apparently people are scanning and wanting to OCR receipts for some reason. I don't fully understand that use case, but someone out there is super excited about this.
I know Google will pay you to actually take pictures of receipts. You know, you leave a store and location services tells them that you've been in Ace Hardware or Target or someplace, and they'll say, hey, take a picture of your receipt and I'll pay you 55 cents for it. I assume it's all about monitoring prices of goods nationwide without needing to actually send people around with cameras and notebooks and things to take pictures.
That must be an Android thing because I've never seen that.
Well, this is how I fund my my Android games habit, you know.
I feel like I can make money by just shopping at stores with really good return policies.
Yeah, you can in some cases make that work for your advantage, but it's so much work for so little gain. I don't know that it's worth your time.
Well, not my time.
Well, even the person you're paying minimum wage of $15 an hour in California, it's not going to be worth your time.
So it's also not worth my money, you're saying?
No, I don't think so. It's sort of like that old scam of like, I'm going to drive all my aluminum cans to Michigan or whatever Midwest state is because it's 10 cents for there versus 5 cents everywhere else. I found a mailman who will take them with me.
It's called arbitrage. It's called arbitrage.
Google Opinion Rewards is what it's called, and mostly it's hey, we noticed you went to the store. And the first question is always like, so when did you go in the store last? And I think it's a check to make sure that you're not just clicking random answers in the questionnaire, because if you get the answer wrong, you don't get paid anything for the survey. But if you get the answer right, and the date you say you went there matches the day they think you went there, they'll ask you another question, which will be like, so how did you pay? Credit card, debit card? No, didn't buy anything. Did you pay cash? And then the next question is always, can you take a picture of your receipt? Routinely, you get like 35, 45, 55 cents for some of these things. And sometimes you get questions about YouTube. Which video would you rather watch? Which is the best suggestion? As a parent, would you like this over this kind of thing? And so, I don't know. I guess it makes me about like $10 every couple of months, probably, in answering questions and selling my soul to the Google enterprise.
Can we wire it to an AI algorithm that has a huge database of receipts?
You assume they don't have machine learning on the other side to detect the fraud?
Oh, they do, for sure. I'm sure
Exactly.
they probably asked 3 people the same question.
Just wars, AI wars.
Yeah. So I mean, considering how much times you've given me crap about privacy on my Apple devices, I don't know how I feel about this admission from you that you are apparently freely giving information to Google for $10 a month. I don't know. I think you've lost some credibility in that argument.
I think I realised that there is privacy's gone now, right? I mean, just driving into town, there's cameras over the bridges recording everyone's license plates. Whenever there's an old person who goes missing because they've driven off in their car and they've got Alzheimer's or something, all they do is they pull up the footage from the camera and they said, oh yeah, they left town yesterday at 2:30 p.m. Like the fact that we're gathering this information is bothersome, but I think privacy's dead.
I've just decided nobody cares about what I do.
Every time I think I'm gonna get really perturbed about privacy and I try to use things like DuckDuckGo, I realize that I really want to just pay. I really want Google to know what my search habits are because the results are so much better.
Yeah, in a way, you need some kind of like a offshore service where you call somebody on a private line and say, hey, search for this thing for me and tell me the top result. Like completely detach yourself from the search and answer process. I don't know how we could do this, but
that's more work than it's worth doing, I think. All right. Well, Azure is announcing the general availability of Azure Monitor for virtual machines. This is the ability to monitor your virtual machines from the OS perspective. It provides in-depth view of VM performance trends and dependencies. You can also access details of a single VM or a scale set resource blade to view the set or a single instance in the set. Azure Monitor for VM allows you to address performance issues on the guest, determine backend dependencies, and discover VM hotspots.
I still think monitoring is troublesome, like 30 years after it should have been solved. And even now, I'm going through the same hassles with CloudWatch, installing a CloudWatch agent, scanning for disk space, scanning for all these things, and publishing custom metrics. It shouldn't be so hard, and it's good to see an out-of-the-box solution.
Absolutely. But the more we can get, the better. Usually, I think that the biggest problem is figuring out how to use these tools, not the tools themselves, but making these tools available, especially when you start making it possible, like across scale sets, which is the big change between our old static data center environment and your new cloud environment. That's a tough one to get over. That's a huge benefit.
Yeah, it's always difficult because metrics have always been tied to a machine name or a host name or an instance ID, but really we don't care about that anymore. We care about the service itself. These 10 instances running the service aren't the same 10 instances as yesterday or the day before, but I still need to aggregate that data for the service as a whole, and I think it's a huge gap. Even SaaS-based services that offer things like endpoint monitoring or antivirus or any of these things where you register when you deploy an instance, there's still this massive gap where there's no like deregistration process where you say, this machine's shut down now. It doesn't exist anymore. Don't charge me for a license for this thing anymore. Don't report on it. Don't tell me that this vulnerability exists on a server which was decommissioned 3 months ago because it was an auto-scaling group. That kind of thing. There's still some way to go in monitoring.
Yeah, the tools need to evolve a bit more.
I mean, most of the SaaS vendors need to evolve too. Like even things like agents you install on servers and the ability for them to register to a console, and they don't really understand auto scaling, and so you end up with these really weird licensing terms where you're like, well, I licensed 1,000 of them, but I have burstable capacity up to like 1,200 nodes. As long as I don't go over that in a 24-hour period, I'm fine. Like these, and it's all this weird self-reporting and all kinds of fun hacks that these companies are doing instead of just building out metering capability. But it's just really interesting to me, how auto scaling, as old as it is now, is really not really well understood yet by a lot of companies who are selling software and services to instances.
Yeah, and some of the terms I've seen are things like if you register an agent on a server, you're going to pay for it for 3 months. Like I want to scale up, I want to scale down in the same day, maybe even in the same hour based on capacity. I don't want to pay a 3-month license for something that only exists. for 2 hours. It's crazy.
Yeah, hopefully someday it'll all get solved. But after coronavirus and after everything else that needs to get solved in technology. But that's it for the new news. Peter, let's go to the lightning round.
All right, let's get kicked off with AWS Elastic Beanstalk launches Docker on Amazon Linux 2 platform. Well, kind of, because it's in beta.
I mean, these are three things that have existed for more than a day. Beanstalk's been around since, I don't know, Amazon started. Docker's been around for 4 or 5 years, and Amazon Linux 2 has been out for over 18 months. How are these still in beta, these three things put together?
It's called integration. Amazon Elasticsearch Service announces support for Elasticsearch version 7.4.
Great. They haven't stopped innovating. Oh, sorry, stealing somebody else's tech.
Oh.
That lawsuit is still progressing.
Let's just say I'm leaning towards a winner already.
I think so.
Okay. Power your Azure GPU workstations with flexible GPU partitioning.
Yay, I guess. But, they're flexible GPUs. Why do I need to partition them? Why can't I just assign them dynamically to my workstation?
That's a very good question.
Are you getting like a part of a GPU? Is that what they're saying? Is that what a partition is? Like you get half a GPU, you get half a GPU.
Yeah, basically.
Oh, okay. Imagine playing a game like that, but like you turn the corner and you can't see anything. Turn the other way, you can see everything. It's insane.
That'd be awesome.
I mean, that's sort of how your computer works now. It's on your desktop, not in the cloud.
Amazon Managed Cassandra Service now helps you manage access to your key spaces and tables by using AWS IAM roles and federated identities.
Nothing worse than Cassandra coupled with all those custom tools and plugins you want to use on Cassandra that now don't work with IAM roles or federated identities and never will.
I thought this was like some backlog item that they've only got to working on because they're all sitting at home.
I think it's going to be extremely valuable to at least one customer.
Is it the most valuable customer?
It's probably a pretty valuable customer is my bet. AWS App Mesh launches support for end-to-end encryption.
Because what I want in my app mesh is to make it even more complicated to troubleshoot. Because now I can't even see the data.
Now, I got a problem with this.
Uh-oh.
If App Mesh is just a transport layer, if I don't encrypt data into App Mesh, it is not end-to-end. If I do encrypt data into App Mesh, it is by default encrypted end-to-end because App Mesh is just a transport layer.
So you're saying it's nonsensical.
I don't see how it didn't support end-to-end encryption before.
And it can't be that the proxies are just handling encryption between the proxies.
Well, customers can now use AWS App Mesh to encrypt traffic between services of their application without any changes to their application code.
Yeah.
So this is for lazy devs.
It's not end-to-end. End-to-end is from the application to the application.
Well, isn't the App Mesh, it's a sidecar to your container. So
Yeah.
it's a very small kernel space where it's not encrypted end-to-end. So yes, you're technically right, but you're being pedantic.
I'm being an ass. I've been at home with my kids for 7 days.
Yeah.
I think this is bad. Wait till next week.
Ooh, I can only imagine.
It's my new favorite feature. Amazon Athena now publishes CloudWatch events for Athena query state transitions.
If only they would do this for CloudFront events, because only thing slower than Athena query is CloudFront.
What's your favorite action in CloudFront that you then have to click the refresh button like 100 times before it's done?
Just changing an ACM certificate is the worst. Like, it's going to expire in 12 minutes, but I have to wait 45 minutes for it to refresh itself.
Purging the cache of a single document that can
There you
take
go.
15 minutes. Like, literally, please, I've got a scheduled deployment at whatever time of night tonight. I'm going to change all this stuff. Just let me schedule in advance the emptying of the cache. Like, why do I have to do it right now and then wait an arbitrary amount of minutes for it to actually happen? Just let me schedule the stuff in advance.
So I did see some chatter on Twitter from some Amazon people who said that the lead time now on CloudFront updates is less than 5 minutes for most events. Yep. I have not yet had a chance to go test that, and they have not written a blog post about it yet, so we haven't talked about it on the show. But if that's true, thank God. But 5 minutes is still too long.
My Rails asset pipeline didn't require any of that. It was wonderful. AWS Security Hub adds new feature fields and resources to the AWS Security Finding format.
And when you look at this, you realize that they are just the stupidest fields ever. Like, let me add severity, but in a non-normalized format so that the vendor who's pushing the data to Security Hub can now choose a predefined severity level. Thank you for that, Amazon. I appreciate that. I now can't call this the really bad, hairy, terrible, awful vulnerability risk level, I have to use critical.
Actually, there's one thing I really enjoy about Elasticsearch and the Elastic Common Schema for logging is that they normalize all this nonsense. And I think Amazon and Google and Azure should actually adopt a common schema for all these kind of events, because it would just make handling this data so much easier.
But then they wouldn't be able to charge you for Athena usage.
And
that would be against the business model.
They could still charge me for Athena usage, but just imagine how much easier it would be if Athena queries could be, commodities on the marketplace, just like anything else now, because all of a sudden everyone's using the same schema. There's no reason why these things need to be branded AWS ECS task definition. It's just a task definition.
Azure SQL database default configurations are changing.
And the default configuration for me is still don't use SQL Server.
Dun, 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 and there Justin takes the point.
That's pretty good. So we have got a dead heat right now. We've got a dead heat in this round. So
can I petition the...
No, I have a tiebreaker. Here's the tiebreaker. I had a really hard time saying AWS security finding format. And so I just pulled up Stopwatch on a little Google stopwatch, and we're going to go one at a time, and I'm going to see who can say AWS security finding format 5 times faster.
By default, Jonathan loses because the British articulation of words insists that he can't slur it together. Okay. He's not a mumble rapper.
Okay. So then Justin, you have to go first so he can set his bearing as to how clear it has to be.
Okay.
So, all right. So we're going to go. I'm going to go 3, 2, 1, go, and then you go, and then I'll stop when you finish. All right.
All right.
There we go. 3, 2, 1, go.
AWS security finding format, AWS security finding format, AWS security finding format, AWS security finding format, AWS security finding format.
8.56 seconds.
Woo!
All right. You ready, Jonathan?
No. I got to figure out a strategy right now. I think...
you can do this. Come on.
I can. Hang on.
All right.
AWS.
No, wait. I got to say 3, 2, 1, and then go. All right.
I wasn't starting. I was just trying to figure out my strategy.
Oh, yeah.
I'm worried about counting to 5 right now.
Ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
AWS security finding format, AWS security finding format, AWS security finding format, AWS security finding format. Okay. Give him the point.
You were way ahead of him, and you fell apart on the 5th one. Justin wins. Justin wins.
I learned a tip for, and I'm not going to do this on the podcast, but I learned a tip for like tongue twisters and things. If you sing them, it's way easier to get past the tongue twisters than actually trying to speak them, because your brain just works differently when you're singing. So
you know what makes it way harder? When you laugh.
Yes. Also,
laughing makes it way harder.
Also, probably the wine and the fatigue and all that stuff. So mostly the wine.
That was an awesome round, though. Good job, guys.
That was good. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming back from Mexico unvirused. We appreciate that, Peter.
I think I'm unvirused. Good. I'm still putting myself on. I was voluntarily home quarantining until they mandated it. So
now you're protesting by running down the Embarcadero.
Well, they said the one thing we're allowed to do is get outside to exercise and go for a walk, and so we went 2 blocks from our house. We see the bay, and lo and behold, there's a whale jumping around in there. So yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Apparently the Jake Tapper on CNN, I think. I don't know. I don't watch these things, but he apparently was all yelling at San Franciscoans for being out walking. I'm like, well, they were told they could do that. It's okay.
Yeah. We were told we could do it. Sunlight is a natural antimicrobial, and we were actively practicing social distancing while we were walking. So he can come talk to me if he has a problem with that.
I mean, it's San Francisco. People naturally just cross the street when they're coming upon a stranger anyway, so it's just true. The norm.
Dude, that is more true. Oh, that is very true.
Well, normally here we talk about what we're looking forward to in the next few weeks, but nothing's happening in the next few weeks other than we're going to see our houses a lot. So I thought maybe we'd share some working from home tips for those who are new to it in the world. And so I thought that'd be a good place to kind of start today and finish up the show. So Peter, well, you want to give some of your tips?
Sure. Yeah, I gave one already, which was, for people who aren't used to the and are having trouble with the asynchronous communication via email or the Slack, where you really don't get to talk to someone, you get to stop them, they don't get to see your expressions. Just if you feel conversations going sideways, pop on a video conference right away. Just stop the conversation. Say, let's get on and talk this through. That's huge for me. I think that and then for me, the other one is, when you don't have that, when there's too many distractions around the house, I turn on music when I'm working and it keeps me in a groove, and then I just work all day long.
Nice. Jonathan, do you have a tip?
I do. I got a few, really. I like mentally separating the work time from the home time. And either I'll go outside and just breathe the fresh air for a little bit and come in and then go and sit down at a desk, or I'll go for a walk earlier and then come back and now it's work time. I think one of the biggest things for me is it's very easy to keep checking your phone. You can bring your work laptop down to the living room and, you're sitting in the evenings and you're still checking your email at 10 o'clock at night. I think it's very important for people to separate the work time from the home time, because otherwise you'll end up working 16-hour days. You'll get burned out. You'll hate your life. You'll hate your job. I think it's very important to be able to separate the two.
Yeah, it's one of the tips for that. I know has worked for friends of mine is you get up in the morning just like you're normally going to go to work, shower just like you're normally going to go to work, you maybe go for a walk, and then you come in a different door of your house even. And just mentally change it up so that, when you're going into work mode, you kind of have that separation. But that's a great tip. That's one of mine as well. I recommend having an office that you close the door behind you at 5 o'clock and you don't go back into until the next morning.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll be working very, very late. But the other one for me is take advantage of the video conferencing that's available through like Hangouts and different services that are free. Definitely get out. Especially if you're an extrovert and you really want to get that interaction time. Get a glass of wine, call up some of your friends on Hangouts, and just chat and have a good time. You don't have to be physically in person with each other to have that interaction. Myself as an introvert, I was born for this, so I'm prepared in all ways. But I know my extrovert friends are getting a little antsy and having those issues. So definitely hop on a hangout with your friends, or even your coworkers if you're close to your coworkers, and enjoy a nice glass of wine or whiskey or a water. If that's your purview. Do those kind of things, but you can definitely keep your social life active if you try a little harder.
One of the other things I'm thinking, a lot of people who never got the chance to work from home may not have a dedicated office space, and they may not have a good desk or a good chair or good posture. And as a person who's had horrible back pain and things over the years, it's really important, if you're going to be sitting at home, don't sit on a hard wooden kitchen chair for 8 or 9 hours a day. Go and get an office chair from IKEA. Go, make sure you're in a good position. You've got a good height on the desk, and you're not bending your neck over to look at the laptop screen. I think it's very important to workplace safety is equally as important in the home as it is in the office.
Yep, you can get carpal tunnel anywhere.
Yeah, and we actually, your posture usually is way worse at home, just because you don't have the facilities you have at work, especially if you don't have a home office. If you're forced to work from home, and I would recommend yoga.
Oh yeah,
do some a little yoga in between to just get your back straightened out after sitting in probably a chair that wasn't made to be sitting in 8 hours a day.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a cheap chair from Office Depot or Staples, those chairs aren't meant to be sat in for a long time. So I know I missed I have an Aeron type chair at the office that's very nice and it's very comfy. And a few years ago, I actually went to IKEA and I bought they call it the Marcus chair, and it's about $200, but it's close to an Aeron you can get to without paying thousands of dollars. Yeah. And so that's definitely a great recommendation. And even desks are somewhat cheap there, and IKEA is still open, at least the last I checked. So if you need to go get a desk real quick and make things worthwhile to work from home, even if it costs you $300 or $400 out of pocket, you should make that investment, because I think it's a good investment on your health and your well-being, especially since this might be several months. You might also ask your employer if they've sent you home from work, if they have any policies around letting you expense your internet services or your desk or any of those kind of things to help you get acquainted. I know my employer, for example, has screens that you can basically borrow during this time. So if you need a second monitor at home, you go to the office and check that out from our IT department. So many companies are trying to come up with those type of things and are available to you. So do ask your employer if you need something to help accommodate your work from home lifestyle.
The thing I miss the most right now is actually, apart from the snacks and the coffee and the subsidized lunches and things, the thing I miss the most is the standing desk. I love the ability to adjust the desk height up and down, or even stand up and work for half a day, standing up instead of sitting down. So I think I may actually try and invest in one of those if they're still shipping out of China right now.
They do have the standing desk with the digital lifter up and down at IKEA too.
Oh, nice.
They do, I guess. And then I've also seen on Amazon, I don't know if they're still available in stock, but they have a kind of a tray you put on your desk, and then it'll actually adjust to the standing position. So you don't have to actually retrofit your whole desk. You can just get this little thing that'll lift your workstation up about a foot or two, whatever you need for your height. Although in Jonathan's case, it's maybe like 2 or 3 inches.
Short guy problems. Sorry.
Well, good. I think those are some great work from home tips, and so we do hope that all of you, our active listeners, are enjoying the show and keeping yourselves healthy and your families healthy, and we will get through this very soon, hopefully.
If not, then the podcast can be down to 2 hosts.
That's how we can get to that level, but we'll go from there. Well, all right, guys, have a great rest of your week. Stay in touch on Slack. We're always on the Slack channel, chatting with each other, and people are asking us for advice and stop checking in and saying hello, and we'd love to talk to you. If you're also looking for someone to talk to, we're also available to you as well. So there you go.
Yep,
absolutely.
All right, guys, have a great night.
See you later.
See you soon.
And that is the Week in Cloud. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Foghorn Consulting. Subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and tweet us your feedback at #TheCloudPod. Or join our Slack channel. Go to our website, thecloudpod.net, for sign-up instructions.
Oh, it's going to be a long 2 or 3 months. Oh, wow.
Just try not to get a divorce and try not to get anybody pregnant.
I'm not sure which would be more expensive, actually.
They have their own expenses in their own ways, but one lasts a lot longer. So,
Yeah, really. Rip a Band-Aid off versus 18 years.